Tribune Audio Network.
I'm never going to give up. I'm never going to give up. We have to find her.
I'm Katie Corman, a reporter for Fox 2 in St. Louis. In the fall of 2018, I had the opportunity to revisit an unsolved case, a case that has haunted the St. Louis area for, at the time, 13 years. The disappearance of Amanda Jones has continued to confuse and frustrate law enforcement, her family, and the greater community for all this time. She was a 26-year-old woman from Jefferson County, Missouri, 8.5 months pregnant, and she disappeared on August 14th, 2005, without a trace. I have lived in the St. Louis area going on 5 years now. This was a case that was new to me when it was brought to my attention in August of 2018. But this is a case that, again, has impacted a lot of people and has stuck with people over the years, including my colleague, Andy Banker, who developed relationships, did strong investigative work, and did a lot of reporting on this case from the very beginning.
Yeah, we really covered the heck out of this from day one. And there was something that just grabbed you right away about Amanda's photo. And that really was our first introduction to the case. I guess her parents, Huey and Bertha Probst, contacted authorities when they couldn't find her. 8.5 months pregnant. She already had a daughter by a different marriage that had ended, a 4-year-old daughter. So she's expecting another child, and she just vanishes. There's a lot to it, and we're going to get into it, I know. But I go back to, our first introduction. Authorities, after Amanda's parents had contacted them, they contacted us. I mean, this was serious right away, and there was no explanation for her to leave, and they gave us that photo and asked us to put it on the air, and said we need information about what happened to Amanda Jones.
Andy, in our line of work, we often hear from people asking us to help find a missing person. A lot of missing kids, a lot of runaways, things like that. But typically, I would say a lot of times those people are found pretty quickly, within a day, a couple of days, a couple of hours even.
Yes, and this is unconscionable that it's gone on this long.
Tell us about some of those early days. When the news first comes out, there's not a lot of the details about how or why or who's all involved. What do you remember from those initial reports?
Mostly her family. Her mom and dad, Huey and Bertha Probst, her sister, Carrie. Her uncle Walt Bowers sticks out to me. And the photos of Amanda. And just, it really had a hold on that community and still does. What sticks out most is my memories of just meeting her family and how genuine, passionate, and heartbroken they were. And what breaks my heart even now, Kate, is that we started going through my old files to get you up to speed so you could dig into this again and not let it drop. I'm so glad you're doing this and to be part of it with you now in some small way. But we went through my old notes. I found a pin, a button that you would pin on your shirt, just with Amanda's photo and her name, and there was a purple ribbon on there. Purple was her favorite color. They released purple balloons from time to time at prayer services for her. And I think of how much that weighed on me then. And not that it doesn't now, and not that I never think about her, because I still do. But so much of my life has gone on, and so many other stories we've covered, and, on and on. But her family and the ones who knew her best and loved her most are still stuck where they were 13 years ago, going on 14 years ago, without an answer. They're still in the same spot. And they just need to know.
And the morning of August 14th, 2005, she got a phone call from Brian Westfall. Here's her parents describing what that conversation entailed.
That Sunday morning, Mandy called the house from her home. And she said, "Dad, you'll never guess who just called." I said, "Who was it?" She said, Brian, said
Westfall.
Brian Westfall, and he wanted to meet and talk. I think she was in the hopes that morning that he was ready to,
Take responsibility. Yeah.
but it didn't happen.
So anyway, she came to church that day. She was a little bit late because of that phone call, but everybody in there looked at her. And, I mean, she was just grinning from ear to ear. I mean, she had this glow on her face, like,
She did.
oh, it was just, I'll never forget it. It was just amazing. And she was dressed in all pink. She had a pink shirt on, a pink and white skirt on, pink flip-flops, pink purse. I don't know what more pink she could have had on, but she was waddling up a storm because she was so
Heavy.
from the baby and everything, you know. And even the preacher said to her how glowing she was that day and how happy. You know, when we left church, she went out in the parking lot and she told Hannah, you know, you go with Grandma and Grandpa and Mommy will see you in a couple hours. Well, Hannah knew when Mama said she was going to be somewhere that she would be there. Okay, so
If not, she would call.
she would call.
So again, they mentioned that pink shirt, the pink skirt, the pink flip-flops, that outfit, that from that photograph, that last photograph we've seen of Amanda so many times.
And striking to me is that they also mention what their preacher or pastor noticed about her, that she was glowing. They said she was waddling because she was so heavy because she was so close to giving birth. But they remember all those little details, and it just all goes to that same feeling that they have and that we've shared and that we've picked up on, that she was not running away from this. There was, you know, she was embracing it.
Hannah knew that when Mom said she'd see you in a couple hours, that she'd see you in a couple hours. There was no doubt in their mind that they were going to see her again. Even as she went to go kind of face this unfortunate situation head on, they didn't have any doubt that she was going to be okay.
Right. And they had no expectation that she was in any danger. So she meets her parents and they go to church, and that goes up until around 12:30 in the afternoon. And then she's going to leave and go to the meeting with Brian Westfall at the Hillsborough Civic Center at 1 o'clock. We know those things happened.
They didn't have any worry that they weren't going to see Amanda again, but they still knew that it was a tense, uncomfortable scenario for everybody to be involved in. And so much so that her sister Carrie had this gut instinct, had this feeling that she should go with her. Again, Amanda's 8.5 months pregnant. Her parents tell us she was already having contractions. It was a hot August day in Missouri. Carrie felt like she should be there.
Right. There was one person who did not have a good feeling about this, who was worried. And I think Amanda kind of talked her out of it because she was rather insistent about, hey, I'll go with you. But that didn't happen.
Before she left, I said, why don't I go with you? Let me go with you. I have my own car. Let me go with you. No, Carrie, I need to do this on my own. I'll be fine. I'm like, just please. She goes, no, Carrie, stay with Mom and Hannah. Dad, I'll be fine.
Why did you offer that?
I had a gut feeling. I just had a gut feeling because, you know, first of all, when she told him she was pregnant, he wanted her to get an abortion. She said no because she was against that. We all are. Then he went, you know, then he didn't talk to her for pretty much the whole time she was pregnant. Then after she contacts him, you know, that he's about to be born and everything, and she just wants to know if he wants to be in his life or not, he all of a sudden contacts her and wants to meet. I just had a bad feeling. But instead of following my gut feeling, I let her go alone. I had my own car. I could have followed her and I didn't do it. And if I would have followed her, she might still be here today and Hayden would be too. But I didn't do it. I listened to her instead and went with my mom and dad. And she never came home.
I can't even imagine.
That is so heartbreaking, and hearing it, I was choking back tears again.
After Brian left the Hillsborough Fire Department, he headed home, and Detective Sergeant Scott Poe tells us that he was visited by his girlfriend, Stephanie Voltrain.
There was something that maybe you would say raises eyebrows about Rubbermaid tubs, and he requested those be brought to his house.
Here's Detective Sergeant Poe.
He did have a girlfriend at the time. He'd known her about 4 years. He did some business dealings with her as well. He boarded her horses. They would speak daily. I know she was initially cooperative, talked to us, agreed to speak with us, and said that she had spoke to him the night on the 13th and says she would be coming down after work the following day. She was asked to grab some Rubbermaid style totes and bring down to the property on Sunday. She said they were for the horse trailer to put tackle in. I suppose from what I understand, Mr. Westfall said she said the old totes were no longer, I guess they were dated, no longer sufficient. So that being said, she went down there that evening. About forgot what time it was there about an hour. I think she got down there about 8:30. Was there for about an hour, left. She knew nothing about Miss Jones, had never heard her name, anything, till she saw the news coverage the following day.
So, Andy, if you'll remember, I believe we've covered this before, but this is the woman that Brian Westfall was dating when he met Amanda Jones in December of 2004.
Yes, and you wonder, when if someone has a motive to see to it that Amanda disappears. I mean, that's what police are looking at. You can't get around it. That's what part of the investigation is. And is there any potential motive here with the nature of the relationships of Brian Westfall, having a girlfriend and then having a night with Amanda that the girlfriend supposedly knew nothing about? How was that worked out? Was that a factor as we were going into this last day?
Here's Detective Sergeant Scott Poe with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office.
She was in the area on that day.
She had come down that evening, yes, ma'am. Which is another thing that complicated us to say that anything bad had happened at the home and thereby get a search warrant, is because there were other people at the home, his mother, his father, her on the property, that had never seen anyone there.
Fair to say, though, that she may have had some sort of
Motive?
interest in seeing this problem go away.
One could say that if there was a problem, she could have interest in Mr. Westfall's well-being. Sure. She initially was upset that she hadn't known anything about Miss Jones, for obvious reasons. They reconciled that. We went to speak to her further, and at that point, she stated she didn't want to speak to us without a lawyer. So there's been no significant additional interviews.
And let's elaborate a little further. To the best of our knowledge, Brian Westfall's family owns several hundred acres of property in that area. It is a vastly spread out piece of land, combination of farmland. They have some cattle. They have, I believe there's some wooded areas. There's a lot of property there. So when you say that Brian Westfall's attorney and the Westfalls themselves agreed to a consent search, we're not talking about all of the property, are we?
No, there wasn't a massive search team going out there with grids on a map and picking out sectors like we've seen for, searches for other missing people or lost children. They didn't have ATVs scouring the property. They didn't take shovels and picks and backhoes and bulldozers, none of that stuff. Now, they weren't specific about exactly what they were allowed to search, but the searches proved fruitless.
Here is Special Agent Michael Christian from the FBI explaining that consent search a little further.
Within a day or two after Amanda was reported missing, there was a search conducted on Brian Westfall's property. It was a consent search that Brian agreed to. However, it was limited. So Brian Westfall told the law enforcement officers where they could search. So it was a limited search.
But that seems a little backwards.
Well, we didn't have a search warrant. So if you're doing a consensual search, I mean, it's where the consenting party tells you you can search, yeah.
It just seems a little backwards that somebody who might have been involved in, and again, innocent until proven guilty, but somebody who was the last person to see this woman alive sort of dictates, well, you can search this area and you can search that area because hypothetically, I hid her in this area.
Sure. If we're going to search a property with a search warrant, we need to have evidence that a crime's been committed at that location. So, I mean, if all you have at that point is a consent search, that's what you have to do.
So, Katie, you got these interviews with the FBI and with the detective sergeant from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department last fall. You got a lot further down the road than we did at the time, when the investigation was just in its infancy. But the same question then, I think, is one you had now. Why just limit it to a consent search that Westfall agrees to?
Yeah, a lot of people go back to, why didn't they get a search warrant to search Brian's property? Didn't he have motive to want Amanda to go away if, in fact, he was the father of that child and he didn't want to be the father of that child, didn't want her to have that child? So I asked Special Agent Michael Christian with the FBI about search warrants and motive. Here's what he had to say.
What do you need to be able to get a search warrant to search a property?
Well, just in general terms, to get a search warrant, you have to establish a crime's been committed, first of all. And then you have to establish that evidence of that crime, that there's probable cause to believe evidence of that crime is in the area or location or object that you want to search.
Does a person's means or motive factor into being able to get a search warrant?
Every instance is going to be different. It could go into that, but you just have to look at the evidence as a whole and just see what it is for that specific case, whether there's enough to get a search warrant.
So is it fair to say that investigators maybe didn't think that Brian Westfall had a motive in this case?
Well, I mean, just based on this, anyone could suggest that his motive would be that he did not want to have a child. So that could be a motive, sure.
But that would not be a strong enough indicator to have a search for his
A
property.
motive on its own is not going to be enough to get a search warrant.
And Andy, let's remember the last place Amanda was seen was the Hillsborough Civic Center. And witnesses saw Brian Westfall leave the Civic Center property, and they said he was alone when he left. So there's no proof, really, that Amanda ever left that property, which is why investigators have focused so much on searching the Civic Center and searching the area around the Civic Center. They cannot prove that she ever went to Brian Westfall's home that day, which is why they cannot get a search warrant to search that property.
Yet legally, that's a big hurdle to cross.
So here's Detective Sergeant Scott Poe explaining that aspect of the investigation a little further.
We need to be able to say that we have more to lead to believe that she went to that home. But you got to remember the timeline he provided. Even witnesses place him still at the horse show grounds, and her car is still there. So there's nothing to ever say he left before the time he said he had with anybody. And then after leaving, we were able to corroborate he did in fact stop by the firehouse and no one was with him, and that was on his way home. When someone grants consent, there's a few stipulations to that. They have to be able to revoke that consent as well. We're there essentially as a courtesy. They don't have to let us there. They know that legally they're not bound to. Contingent on that is that we have to stop when they tell us to, and we can only go where they let us, which is frustrating. Absolutely. Would I love to go do and this is something I've talked to some people close to Ms. Jones about before. I would love to go and do a complete thorough search of everything. Unfortunately, the law doesn't allow me to do that. And when someone has a lawyer and are adamant all contact goes through the lawyer, I can't keep, there's certain rules to how often I can approach, how I can approach. So I get their frustration, the loved ones, and I absolutely do, but the law binds us in a lot of ways.
I keep hoping or wishing that somebody knows more that hasn't came forward. It's as simple as that. because we need help. I mean, it's going on 14 years. The family needs help. We want to solve this farm. If anybody has information, don't hesitate to contact us, no matter how small, how long ago. Like I said, we're following up with leads in Texas right now. We're going to follow up on everything that comes across, and a lot of times in these cases, something very minute somebody doesn't think is real obvious, and it ends up being, you know, the final clue, what we need to reach that probable cause level.
Bert, as we prepare to sort of wrap up this podcast, and are there any final thoughts you have for people listening, people who are remembering this case, learning about it for the first time, anything that you want to stick with people as we sort of move forward?
Yeah, I want them to take a look at her. Look at her picture. Very sweet, loving woman. And think of that baby. That baby now, you know, didn't have a chance to have a life.
What if it was yours? Yeah.
Yeah, and look at her as if, was this your daughter? Your sister? Your wife? You know, and just take it to heart, and if you hear chatter around, listen, you know, and even if it's something you don't think would help, it might be just that key. That little thing might be the key it's going to take.
Anything else you want us to know?
Well, we want to thank you and
Yes.
Andy for what you have done on this case, for bringing it back out in the public eye. You just don't know how much our hearts are appreciated over that. We really appreciate it.
More than you know.
Yeah, more than you know.
Both of you guys. Been wonderful.
Here's the 14th being the last one, and maybe by 15 we'll know.
We pray for that every year. You know, I pray and say, you know, like when a holiday goes by, oh Lord, here's another Christmas without her. Do we have to go another year or another birthday? You know, and when Hannah was graduating, you know, it's like, oh Lord, here's Hannah graduating and her mom's not here. You know, to see it. How many of these things, milestones, has she missed because somebody decided to take her away?
The FBI is offering a reward of up to $20,000 for information leading to the location of Amanda Jones and her unborn child, or for information leading to the person or people responsible for their disappearance. We thank you for listening. I'm Katie Corman.
And I'm Andy Banker.
Hi all, it's Katie. We have an update we thought was important to include in this wrap-up episode. After my sit-down with Captain Gary Higginbotham, he reached out to me with some new information. We have all been under the impression all these years that the only search conducted at the Westfall property was a limited search guided by Brian Westfall and his attorney 2 days after Amanda disappeared. Higginbotham says after reviewing the file again, he saw another search was conducted on August 24, 2005. He says the case file indicates the sheriff's office, a canine search team, and the FBI conducted another search of the Westfall property, including Brian Westfall's home and vehicles. The home of Westfall's parents, who also live on the property, was not searched. Higginbotham says several items were seized from the property for further investigation, but he could not specify what those items were or if they proved to be helpful in the investigation. A reminder, the Westfalls own hundreds of acres, and we still don't know how extensively the property was searched. But we thought it was important to let you know that we learned a second search was in fact conducted. Higginbotham says the sheriff's office received 342 leads on the original case, and the leads have continued to roll in since then. Higginbotham tells me this is a lot of leads, and they have led to searches, interviews, phone records, and surveillance footage. And one more update for you. The first day I met Amanda's parents, they shared with me that when Amanda went to meet Westfall on the day she disappeared, she brought with her sonogram photos to show him, in hopes that it might entice him to want to be in Hayden's life. All these years, those photos have been kept as evidence. Bertha and Hugh said they were the only photos they had or would ever have of their grandson, and they were desperate to get them back. After mentioning it again, this time to Captain Higginbotham, the sheriff's office found the photos and provided Amanda's family with photographed copies of the sonograms. The originals will remain in evidence until the case is closed.